The first time I saw him, I didn't. Not really. I noticed the shift in the restaurant's atmosphere instead. Like someone had turned down the volume dial on the world, the chatter at nearby tables softened. The clinking of silverware grew hesitant. Even the kitchen staff, visible through the serving window, slowed their frantic movements to a cautious choreography. "Table 7, Monica hissed, appearing at my elbow and pressing a leather-bound menu into my damp palm. "Corner booth." I followed her gaze across La Stella's dining room, past the glittering chandeliers that hung too low and the tables draped in crisp white cloths. The corner booth, the best seat in the house, always reserved but rarely occupied, was no longer empty. "That's Dante Russo," she whispered, tugging at the wrinkled hem of her server's uniform. "Don't stare, and for God's sake, don't mess up." My throat constricted. Everyone in East Harbor knew the name Dante Russo, even sheltered girls like me who'd spent the last 4 years caring for a dying father instead of paying attention to city politics, or what lurked beneath them. Whispered conversations in the break room had taught me enough. Dante Russo owned half the waterfront. People who crossed him disappeared. And now he sat in my section, a dark silhouette against cream-colored upholstery. "Why me?" I asked, smoothing my hands over my black apron. "Can't you take him?" Monica snorted. "Manager's orders. Said you're the least likely to make small talk." She gave me a once-over, a flicker of sympathy crossing her features. "Just be invisible, Ellie. The way you usually are. I could do invisible." I'd perfected it over years of tiptoeing around my father's sick room, learning to exist without making a sound. Invisibility had become my armor in a world that moved too fast and demanded too much. With a deep breath, I straightened my spine and approached table 7. 3 men occupied the curved booth. 2 sat on the outside edges, large men with impassive faces and bulky suit jackets that didn't quite hide the unnatural weight beneath their arms. Guards, sentries. Their eyes tracked my approach without emotion, but it was the man in the center who commanded the space. He wasn't looking at me yet, his attention focused on something on the table. A phone, maybe, though I couldn't see past his broad shoulders. Dark hair, neatly trimmed at the sides, but longer on top, fell across his forehead as he bent over whatever held his interest. He wore no tie with his charcoal suit, and the top buttons of his white shirt were undone, revealing a sliver of tanned skin. I stopped at a respectful distance, careful not to cast a shadow over the table. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to La Stella." The guards didn't acknowledge me, but the man in the center looked up, and the air vanished from my lungs. Dante Russo couldn't have been more than 35, with features that belonged on a Renaissance painting. High cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by 5 o'clock shadow, and lips that curved slightly at one corner, as if he found the world perpetually amusing. But it was his eyes that trapped me. Dark, almost black in the restaurant's dim lighting, intense with an intelligence that seemed to strip away pretense. Those eyes widened fractionally as they met mine, and something flashed in their depths. Surprise? Recognition? I couldn't tell, but it sent a shiver racing down my spine. "Water for the table," he said, his voice low and smooth, with the barest hint of an Italian accent. Not a question. Never a question from men like him. I nodded, acutely aware of my shabby uniform, the cheap synthetic fabric that never quite looked pressed despite my efforts. Next to his obvious wealth, the gold watch that glinted at his wrist probably cost more than a year of my rent. I felt like a shadow, insubstantial and gray. "Would you like to hear our specials?" I managed, proud that my voice remained steady. "No." He hadn't looked away from my face. "Bring a bottle of the 1989 Brunello di Montalcino. And whatever appetizers the chef recommends." I should have written it down, but my hands refused to move. I stood frozen under his scrutiny, feeling as though he was cataloging every detail. The dark circles under my eyes from too many double shifts, the wisps of blonde hair escaping my hastily secured bun, the small scar above my right eyebrow from a childhood fall. "Is that a problem?" he asked when I remained silent too long. "No, sir." I finally broke eye contact, looking down at my notepad. 1989, Brunello di Montalcino and Chef's Choice appetizers. I'll bring those right away. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Your name?" My pulse jumped. Eleanor, sir. Everyone calls me Ellie. Ellie, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Not tonight. Tonight? You're Eleanor. Heat crawled up my neck and into my cheeks. I nodded once and hurried away, feeling his gaze burning into my back. In the kitchen, I leaned against the cool tile wall, trying to collect myself. This was ridiculous. He was just a customer, an important, dangerous customer, but still just a man wanting dinner. I'd serve him efficiently and invisibly, as Monica had instructed, and then he would leave, and my life would continue in its narrow, careful path. But when I returned with the wine, something had shifted. The bodyguards had moved to a separate table nearby, leaving Dante alone in the booth. As I set down the bottle, I noticed a small velvet box open on the table beside his hand. Inside gleamed a diamond ring, the stone so large it seemed obscene. "Do you think she'll like it?" he asked, catching me staring. I almost dropped the corkscrew. "I'm sure any woman would, sir." His mouth curved into that half-smile again. "That's not what I asked, Eleanor." I glanced at the ring again, then at his expectant face. Something told me he valued honesty, so I gave it to him. "It's beautiful, but it's also intimidating. Like wearing a building on your finger." I immediately regretted my words, but to my surprise he laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Several heads turned in our direction, shocked by the sound. "Intimidating," he repeated, closing the box with a snap and slipping it into his pocket. "Perhaps that's appropriate." As I poured his wine with hands that weren't quite steady, he watched me with that same unsettling intensity. "You're new here." 6 months, I corrected softly. "And before that?" I shouldn't answer. Personal questions from customers, especially customers like him, were dangerous territory, but something in his tone made it impossible to deflect. "I took care of my father. He was sick for a long time." I set the bottle down. "He died in January." Dante nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "And now you're alone." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "That's a dangerous state for a woman in this city." Before I could respond, the kitchen doors swung open, and Marco, one of the other servers, emerged with a tray of appetizers. He faltered when he saw me standing at Dante's table, confusion crossing his features. He'd been scheduled for the night off. What was he doing here? "I've got this," he said, moving toward us with an eager smile. Something about his appearance set off alarm bells in my mind. Marco never smiled like that, all teeth and no warmth. And he'd changed his usual cologne for something stronger, more chemical. His movements seemed too precise, his eyes too focused on Dante rather than the tray he carried. In that moment, everything slowed down. I saw Marco's hand dip into his jacket pocket. I saw the slight bulge there, unnatural and angular. I saw his eyes, cold and determined in a way I'd never noticed before. Without thinking, I leaned close to Dante, my lips nearly brushing his ear. "Keep still," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. My hand found his under the table, squeezing hard in warning. Dante went rigid beside me, but he didn't move, didn't turn to look at Marco's approach. Instead, his fingers interlaced with mine in a grip so tight it was almost painful. "Sir," Marco said, stopping at our table. "Compliments of the chef." His right hand remained inside his jacket. I knocked my water glass over, sending ice and liquid cascading into Dante's lap. He jerked back instinctively as I fumbled with my napkin. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, loud enough to draw attention. "Let me help you with that." The commotion was enough. Dante's bodyguards materialized beside us, one of them casually gripping Marco's wrist and pulling it from his pocket. Something metallic clattered to the floor. A syringe, I realized with horror. Not a gun, but perhaps something deadlier. What happened next blurred into chaos. Marco was dragged away through a side door, his face drained of color. Dante stood, seemingly unconcerned about his wet pants, and placed a hand on the small of my back. "We're leaving," he said, his voice calm but brooking no argument. "You're coming with me." "What?" "No, I can't. I have a shift," I stammered, panic rising in my chest. His expression softened fractionally. Eleanor, the man who just tried to kill me saw your face. He heard you warn me. How long do you think you'll last once his employers find out? The blood drained from my face as the implications set in. I'd acted on instinct, never considering the consequences. By saving Dante Russo, I had potentially signed my own death warrant. My apartment, my things, will be taken care of. His hand on my back guided me toward the exit. Right now, we need to move. Outside, a sleek black car idled at the curb, its engine a low purr in the autumn night. One of the bodyguards opened the rear door, and Dante ushered me inside before sliding in beside me. The interior smelled of expensive leather and his cologne, something woody and dark that made my head swim. As the car pulled away from the curb, I stared back at La Stella's illuminated entrance, watching my normal life recede into the distance. 6 hours into a Tuesday night shift, and I had somehow stumbled from invisibility into the orbit of the most dangerous man in East Harbor. Dante's hand found mine in the darkness of the back seat. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "Why?" I turned to look at him, this beautiful, lethal stranger who now controlled my fate. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It just felt wrong." The way he looked at you. He studied me for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the inside of my wrist. My pulse jumped beneath his touch. "Most people in this city would celebrate my death, Eleanor. Do you know who I am? What I do?" "I've heard things," I whispered. "And yet you warned me." His free hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, the gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. "I think fate has delivered you to me for a reason." As the car accelerated into the night, carrying me away from everything familiar, I couldn't help but wonder if I had escaped one danger, only to fall into something far more consuming. In Dante Russo's world, salvation and captivity might prove to be the same thing. Dawn broke through unfamiliar curtains, casting ribbons of pale gold across a bed that wasn't mine. I blinked awake slowly, disoriented by the silken sheets and the vast expanse of mattress surrounding me. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then the previous night came rushing back. Marco's cold eyes, the syringe clattering to the floor, Dante Russo's hand on my back guiding me to his car. I sat up, clutching the sheets to my chest, though I was still fully dressed in yesterday's uniform, minus my shoes and apron. The bedroom around me was spacious but surprisingly understated. Cream walls, dark wooden furniture, and large windows overlooking a slice of ocean in the distance. No personal photographs, no clutter. It could have been a high-end hotel suite, but for the faint scent of sandalwood and citrus that seemed embedded in the pillowcase, Dante's scent. A soft knock at the door made me jump. "Miss Eleanor?" A woman's voice, accented and professional. "Mr. Russo asked me to check if you're awake." "May I come in?" "Yes," I called, my own voice sounding foreign to my ears. The door opened to reveal a petite woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a simple black dress with a white collar, like a modern interpretation of a housekeeper's uniform. Her eyes swept over me with practiced efficiency. "I am Mrs. Vega," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Mr. Russo has arranged clothing for you. When you're ready, breakfast is served on the terrace. The bathroom is through there." She gestured to a door I hadn't noticed. "You'll find everything you need." Before I could form a response, she crossed to a closet and pulled out a garment bag, laying it carefully across the foot of the bed. "Mr. Russo will join you in 1 hour. Please make yourself comfortable until then." With that, she exited, leaving me alone again with the garment bag and 1,000 questions. The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, all marble and glass with a shower big enough for 4 people. I stood under the hot spray for long minutes, trying to make sense of my new reality. By warning Dante, I had saved him from whatever Marco had planned, but I had also entangled myself in something dangerous and unknown. There would be consequences. There were always consequences. Inside the garment bag, I found a simple but elegant sundress in pale blue, along with underwear that still had price tags attached. My cheeks burned when I saw the designer label and the 4-digit price. The tags on the underwear told a similar story. Who had selected these items? Dante himself? The thought made my stomach flutter with an emotion I couldn't identify. I dressed quickly, surprised by how perfectly everything fit. The mirror reflected a stranger, a young woman in expensive clothes with freshly washed hair and wide, uncertain eyes. I looked both more and less like myself. Following Mrs. Vega's directions, I made my way through the house, a sprawling oceanfront property with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor. Armed men stood at various points, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. They nodded respectfully as I passed, but their eyes tracked my movements with calculated vigilance. The terrace overlooked a private beach, the morning sun glinting off the water. A table had been set with an array of breakfast foods, fresh fruit, pastries, a silver carafe of what smelled like coffee. I hesitated at the threshold, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of it all. "You look lovely in that color." I turned to find Dante watching me from the doorway. He'd changed since last night, now dressed in tailored dark jeans and a light gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms and the edge of what looked like a tattoo disappearing beneath the fabric. Despite the casual attire, he radiated authority. A predator at rest, but no less dangerous. "Thank you for the clothes," I said, crossing my arms over my chest self-consciously. "And for the room, but I need to know what's happening. Why am I here? When can I go home?" His expression softened as he moved toward me. "You're afraid. That's understandable." He pulled out a chair at the table and gestured for me to sit. "Please eat something. We have much to discuss." I sat cautiously, watching as he took the seat across from me and poured coffee into 2 porcelain cups. His movements were precise, controlled. The sunlight caught the angles of his face, illuminating features that seemed carved from marble. "Your apartment has been searched," he said without preamble, sliding a cup toward me. "My men found surveillance equipment installed in the walls. Someone has been watching you for weeks, possibly months." The coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "What? Why would anyone—" "To get to me." He leaned forward, those dark eyes intent on mine. "Last night wasn't random, Eleanor. Marco was sent by my enemies, who somehow knew I would be at La Stella. They placed him there months ago, waiting for an opportunity. But I don't understand. What do I have to do with any of this?" Dante's jaw tightened. "That's what I've been trying to determine. The fact that they were watching you suggests they believed you could be useful to them in some way?" A chill ran through me despite the morning warmth. "I've never met you before last night. I don't know anything about your business or your enemies." "No," he agreed, studying me over the rim of his cup. "But your father did." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. My father? He was a high school history teacher before he got sick. Among other things, Dante set down his cup with deliberate care. "Vincent Gray worked for me for many years, Eleanor. He was one of my most trusted advisors until his illness forced his retirement." I shook my head, rejecting his words. "That's not possible. My father was a good man. He taught teenagers about the Civil War in ancient Rome. He grew tomatoes in our backyard." "All true," Dante acknowledged. "Vincent compartmentalized his life perfectly. That's what made him so valuable, his ability to move between worlds without contamination. His moral compass remained intact despite the company he kept." Memories flashed through my mind, unexplained late nights when I was a child, hushed phone calls, occasional meetings with stern-faced men who showed my father unusual deference. I had attributed it all to school board politics or teacher union business. How naive I'd been. "What did he do for you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Dante considered me for a long moment before answering. He managed certain financial arrangements, legitimate investments, properties, charitable foundations. He helped build the legal facade that protects my other interests. My father, the quiet academic I'd admired my whole life, had worked for the mob, had laundered money, or whatever euphemism they used for making criminal enterprises appear legitimate. The knowledge felt like a betrayal, a posthumous rewriting of everything I thought I knew about him. "Vincent never wanted you involved," Dante continued, his voice gentler now. "When he fell ill, he came to me one last time, asking for my word that you would be protected, kept separate from our world, and yet here I am," I said bitterly. "Here you are." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, "because someone wants to use you against me. someone who knew about Vincent's connection to my organization and assumed his daughter might make a useful pawn. I pulled my hand away. I'm not a pawn. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No. A pawn wouldn't have noticed what you noticed last night. A pawn wouldn't have acted so decisively, warning a dangerous stranger about a threat. You're something else entirely, Eleanor. The intensity in his gaze made me look away, out toward the ocean where waves crashed against the private shoreline. I want to go home. That's not possible right now. It isn't safe. So I'm a prisoner? You're under my protection. He stood abruptly, pacing to the terrace railing. Until I eliminate the threat, you'll remain here where I can ensure your safety. And how long will that take? I asked, anxiety crawling up my throat. He turned back to me, sunlight haloing his dark hair. That depends on how quickly we can identify who's behind this. I have people working on it, tracking Marco's communications, investigating who placed him at La Stella. A thought occurred to me then, something so obvious I was ashamed it had taken me this long to ask. The ring. Last night, you had an engagement ring. You're getting married? Something dangerous flashed across his features before his expression smoothed again. That's complicated. Complicated how? Either you're engaged or you're not. He returned to the table, leaning forward with his palms flat against the surface. In my world, Eleanor, marriages are often strategic alliances rather than love matches. The Vasiliev family controls the port operations I need to expand my shipping interests. Their daughter comes with access to those resources. The casual way he spoke of marriage, of a woman, as a business transaction made my skin crawl. So you were going to propose to someone you don't love for business reasons? I was considering it, he corrected. Now those considerations have become more complex. Because of me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes darkened. Because someone tried to kill me before I could make the proposal. Because that someone might be connected to the Vasiliev family themselves. And yes, because of you. A door opened behind us, and one of Dante's bodyguards, the same hulking man from the restaurant, stepped onto the terrace. Boss, Vasiliev is on the line. Says it's urgent. Dante straightened, all trace of softness vanishing from his demeanor. I'll take it in my office. Have someone bring Miss Gray anything she needs. He turned back to me. We'll continue this discussion later. Please don't leave the house. The grounds are secure, but the security system only extends to the property line. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my cooling coffee and the weight of revelations I couldn't process. My father had been a criminal. I was being watched. And now I was essentially a captive in a mobster's beachfront mansion, caught in the crossfire of a power struggle I didn't understand. I spent the morning exploring the parts of the house that weren't obviously off-limits. The library drew me in, wall-to-wall bookshelves filled with an eclectic mix of classics, history, and modern literature. Many of the books showed signs of having been read repeatedly, their spines cracked, pages dog-eared. I wondered if they belonged to Dante, or if this had been someone else's sanctuary before he acquired the property. In a glass-fronted cabinet, a collection of framed photographs caught my eye. Most featured the same dark-haired woman in different stages of life. As a young bride, holding a baby, standing beside a teenage boy who had Dante's eyes. His mother, I realized. The boy must be Dante himself, decades younger but with the same watchful intensity. He was 15 there, a voice said from behind me. I turned to find Mrs. Vega arranging fresh flowers in a vase near the doorway. She nodded toward the photograph I'd been studying. The day before his father was killed. After that, there were no more family pictures. How did his father die? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Rivals, she said simply. Mr. Russo was forced to take over the family business very young. It shaped him in ways both good and bad. There was something in her tone, a mixture of pride and sadness, that made me wonder about her relationship to the Russo family. You've known him a long time. I raised him after his mother fell into depression. She finished with the flowers and turned to face me fully, which is why I feel I can tell you this. Be careful with his heart, Miss Gray. It may seem impenetrable, but that's only because it's been broken before. Before I could respond to this unexpected warning, the library door opened again, and Dante himself appeared, his expression thunderous. His eyes darted between Mrs. Vega and me. "Elena," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I need a moment with Miss Gray." Mrs. Vega nodded and slipped from the room without another word. As the door closed behind her, Dante stalked toward me, his movements reminding me of a caged panther I'd once seen at the zoo. Power constrained, but barely. "Did you know Marco before last night?" he demanded without preamble. I blinked in surprise. "Only as a co-worker. We were on opposite shifts most of the time." "Did he ever express interest in you? Ask personal questions? Offer to drive you home?" "No, nothing like that. We barely spoke." I set down the photograph I'd been holding. "What's happened?" Dante ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect arrangement. "Marco is dead." Before my men could question him properly, he bit down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his tooth. Professional job. Horror washed through me. "Oh my God." He had your address written on a slip of paper in his wallet, along with the words, "Gray's daughter." Dante's eyes bored into mine. "I need to know if you're holding anything back, Eleanor. For both our sakes." "I'm not," I insisted, indignation cutting through my shock. "Until last night, I thought my father was just a teacher. I had no idea he worked for you, or that anyone would care who his daughter was." Dante studied me for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. He closed the distance between us, his hands coming up to frame my face. The touch was gentle but insistent, forcing me to meet his gaze. "I believe you," he said softly, "but someone wants me to think otherwise. Someone is trying to drive a wedge between us before we've even had a chance to." He trailed off, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones in small, distracting circles. "A chance to what?" I whispered, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, of the warmth radiating from his body. Instead of answering, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was brief but devastating. A claiming, a promise, a warning all at once. When he pulled away, his eyes had darkened to obsidian. "I've had men watching you for months," he confessed, his hands still cradling my face. "After your father died. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I promised him I would keep you safe. I've seen how hard you work, how you struggle to make ends meet, how you fade into the background, trying not to be noticed." Ooh, my heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. "You've been spying on me?" "Protecting you," he corrected. "Though clearly not well enough. If others managed to bug your apartment without my people noticing. I should have been furious, should have pushed him away. Instead, I found myself swaying toward him, drawn by something I couldn't name. What happens now?" His expression hardened with determination. "Now, I keep you closer than ever. No one touches what's mine, Eleanor, and whether you've realized it yet or not, you became mine the moment you whispered in my ear." For 3 days, I existed in a strange limbo within Dante's fortress by the sea. By unspoken agreement, we didn't discuss the kiss in the library or his possessive declaration that followed. Instead, a careful dance emerged between us, proximity without intimacy, connection without acknowledgement. Dante worked from home, converting a section of the sprawling mansion into an impromptu command center. Men in suits came and went at all hours, their hushed conversations falling silent whenever I entered a room. I caught fragments nonetheless, names I didn't recognize, locations throughout the city, and once, the chilling phrase, "clean it up completely." On the 4th morning, I stood on the balcony of my bedroom, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of pink and gold. Despite the beauty around me and the undeniable luxury of my temporary prison, restlessness gnawed at me. I needed answers. About my father, about Marco, about the danger that had upended my life. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Mrs. Vega with breakfast. Instead, Dante appeared, looking unusually casual in black track pants and a fitted gray t-shirt that revealed the muscular contours of his arms. A thin sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead, suggesting he'd been exercising. "Good morning," he said, joining me at the balcony railing. "Sleep well?" I nodded, suddenly conscious of my thin nightgown and tangled hair. "Well enough." He smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. Liar. You were pacing until after midnight. I could hear you through the floor. Heat crept into my cheeks. His bedroom must be directly below mine. A thought both unsettling and thrilling. I have a lot on my mind. I know. He turned to face the ocean, his profile sharp against the morning light. That's why I'm here. Get dressed. I want to show you something. Curiosity overrode my hesitation. What is it? Your father's legacy. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. 15 minutes? I agreed, and he left me to prepare. In the massive closet attached to my room, I found more clothing that hadn't been there the day before. Jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, all in my size and in colors I would have chosen myself. The casual items were a welcome change from the dresses and skirts that had comprised my wardrobe so far. Dressed in jeans and a simple blue sweater, I found Dante waiting in the foyer. He'd changed as well, into dark jeans and a black button-down shirt. A leather jacket hung over his arm, and keys dangled from his fingers. No bodyguards today? I asked, noticing the absence of his usual shadows. Something like mischief flickered across his features. Just driver and security in a follow car. Sometimes I need space to breathe. He held up the keys. Besides, I rarely get to drive myself anymore. The garage beneath the house contained a collection of vehicles that would have made a museum curator weep. Vintage sports cars, alongside modern luxury sedans, each more expensive than the last. Dante led me to a sleek black Porsche nestled between two larger SUVs. Your chariot, he said, opening the passenger door with a flourish. The interior smelled of leather and Dante's cologne, enveloping me as I slid into the low seat. He joined me a moment later, starting the engine with a throaty rumble that vibrated through the car's frame. Where are we going? I asked, as we emerged from the underground garage into the bright morning sunlight. Dante navigated the winding coastal road with practiced ease, one hand resting loosely on the steering wheel. Your father owned property in Mount Cedar. Did you know that? I frowned. Mount Cedar was an exclusive enclave in the hills overlooking East Harbor, home to the city's elite. That's impossible. We lived in a rented duplex my whole life. Dad was always careful with money, especially after my mother died. Vincent was careful with appearances, Dante corrected. The modest lifestyle, the rented home, all part of maintaining his separation between worlds. But he was well compensated for his work with me. The implications staggered me. All those years of pinching pennies, taking on extra tutoring jobs to make ends meet, worrying about medical bills during my father's illness. Had it all been an elaborate charade? Why would he live like that if he had money? I asked, my voice tight with confusion and the first stirrings of anger. Dante's eyes remained on the winding road ahead. Protection. For both of you. Wealth attracts attention. And attention was the last thing Vincent wanted for his daughter. We drove in silence after that, climbing higher into the hills until the city spread out below us, a sprawling patchwork of buildings with the harbor gleaming in the distance. Finally, Dante turned down a private road partially hidden by mature oak trees. A wrought iron gate stood open, leading to a circular driveway that curved around a central fountain. The house beyond wasn't what I expected. No ostentatious mansion, but a tasteful Mediterranean-style villa. 2 stories of warm stucco with terracotta roof tiles and climbing bougainvillea framing the entryway. It looked peaceful, welcoming. This is it? I asked as Dante parked in front of the main entrance. He nodded, studying my reaction. Your father purchased it almost 20 years ago after your mother died. He never lived here, but he maintained it. Said it would be yours when the time was right. A lump formed in my throat. I don't understand any of this. I know. His hand found mine across the console, squeezing gently. That's why we're here. You need to see who your father really was. All of him. Not just the parts he showed you. Inside, the villa was filled with light from tall windows and glass doors that opened onto terraced gardens. The furnishings were simple, but elegant, clearly chosen with care. What struck me most, however, were the bookshelves, entire walls lined with volumes, many of which I recognized from my father's collection in our modest home. He brought books here regularly, Dante explained, watching me run my fingers over the familiar spines. Added to the library whenever he acquired something new. It was his way of making this place ready for you, I think. In the study, a large desk dominated the space, its surface bare except for a single wooden box. Dante crossed to it, lifting the lid to reveal a leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's neat script. "I found these after he died," Dante said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Vincent asked me to bring you here when you were ready to learn the truth. I thought I'd have more time to prepare you." With trembling hands, I took the letter, breaking the seal to reveal several pages of handwritten text. My father's words leapt from the page in a voice so familiar it made my chest ache. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And Dante has judged it necessary for you to know the truth I've kept from you all these years. I hope you can forgive me for the secrets and the lies. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to protect you and give you the chance at a life uncomplicated by the world I inhabited. Yes, I taught history to teenagers. Yes, I grew tomatoes. But I also managed investments and properties for Dante Russo and his organization. I laundered money, created paper trails, established legitimate businesses to conceal illegitimate earnings. I did this knowingly, with open eyes. It began before you were born, when your mother and I were young and desperate. Medical school had left us drowning in debt, and then came her diagnosis: cancer, aggressive and expensive to treat. Dante's father offered me a way out, money for her treatments in exchange for my financial expertise. By the time I realized the full extent of what I was involved in, I was in too deep to extricate myself. After your mother died, I considered running, taking you far away from East Harbor and the Russo family. But Dante had just lost his own father, and in our shared grief, I saw something in him worth believing in. A young man thrust into power who needed guidance to wield it with some measure of restraint and wisdom. Over the years, I like to think I helped steer him toward choices that minimized bloodshed and harm, that built something with at least a veneer of legitimacy. I cannot claim clean hands, but I can say I tried to be a moderating influence. The villa you now stand in represents my hope for your future. A fresh start, free from financial worry, in a place no one associates with Vincent Gray, high school teacher. The accounts linked to this property contain enough money to support you comfortably for many years, or to fund whatever dreams you wish to pursue far from East Harbor. I ask only one thing: be careful with Dante Russo. He is both better and worse than his reputation suggests, capable of terrible violence, but also of surprising tenderness. He has honored his promise to keep you separate from his world while I lived. If you are reading this now, circumstances have forced his hand. Trust your instincts, my brave girl. They have always been your greatest strength. All my love, Dad. I lowered the letter, tears blurring my vision. Dante stood by the window, his back to me, giving me the privacy to absorb my father's words. "He thought he was protecting me," I said finally, my voice breaking on the last word. Dante turned, his expression somber. He was. Vincent was the closest thing to a father I had after my own was killed. His only condition for continuing to work with me was your safety and separation from our world. And now that separation is gone. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into its envelope. "What happens to me now, Dante?" He crossed the room slowly, his movements measured as if approaching a frightened animal. "That depends on what you want, Eleanor. This house is yours. The accounts your father established are considerable, enough for you to disappear. Start fresh somewhere far from East Harbor and the complications of my life." "Is that what you want me to do?" I asked, searching his face for some hint of his thoughts. His jaw tightened. "What I want?" He stopped, seeming to wrestle with himself. "What I want doesn't matter. Your father entrusted your safety to me, and I've already failed by allowing others to target you. The smartest thing would be for you to take the money and go. But that's not what you're going to suggest." A rueful smile touched his lips. "No. Because I'm selfish, Eleanor. Because in less than a week, you've become important to me." The admission hung between us, weighted with unspoken implications. I thought of Mrs. Vega's warning about his heart, of my father's letter describing him as capable of both violence and tenderness. The Vasilyev family, I said. The engagement. Is that still happening? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. No. That arrangement is no longer viable. Marco's attempt on my life came hours before a scheduled meeting with Viktor Vasilyev. The timing wasn't coincidental. So they tried to kill you? Or make it appear that way to provoke a war between our organizations? Dante moved closer, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Either way, the result is the same. The alliance is dead, and tensions are escalating. East Harbor is about to become very dangerous. I thought of my small apartment, my job at La Stella, the quiet life I'd built for myself. All of it seemed like it belonged to someone else now, a simpler version of Eleanor Gray, who hadn't yet learned about her father's double life or kissed a mafia boss in his library. I should go, I said, though the words felt hollow. Take the money, start over somewhere else. Yes, Dante agreed, even as his hand came up to cut my cheek. You should. But neither of us moved. His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip, and I leaned into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. Tell me to let you go, he murmured, his voice rough with restraint. Tell me to put you on a plane to anywhere but here, and I will. The answer that rose to my lips surprised even me. No. His eyes darkened. Eleanor, I'm tired of being protected from the truth, I interrupted. Tired of others deciding what I should know, where I should be, who I should be. My father did it for years, and now you're trying to do the same. Dante's expression changed, a flicker of admiration breaking through his careful control. And what truth do you want, Eleanor? That I've killed men who threatened my business? That I've built my fortune on activities your father helped conceal? That I want you in ways that would terrify you if you understood them fully? His bluntness should have repelled me. Instead, it drew me closer, like a moth to a dangerous flame. I want all of it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. No more secrets, no more protection. If I'm going to make a real choice, I need to know what I'm choosing. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Then he took my hand and led me through the villa to a secluded terrace overlooking the gardens below. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks hazy in the morning light. We sat at a stone table, and Dante removed his jacket, draping it over the back of his chair with deliberate care. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a detached quality, as if reciting facts from a textbook. The Russo family has controlled various aspects of East Harbor's underworld for 3 generations. My grandfather started with protection rackets and gambling. My father expanded into drug trafficking and weapons. When I took over at 15, we were at war with 3 rival families. He paused, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the table. I was angry, reckless. In my first year, I doubled our territory, but lost 17 men, including 2 cousins. Vincent, your father, was the one who suggested a different approach. Legitimacy, he called it. A way to launder not just our money, but our reputation. So you became a businessman, I said, remembering the newspapers that occasionally featured Dante's name in connection with real estate developments or charity galas. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I became many things: a property developer, a shipping magnate, a silent partner in dozens of legitimate enterprises across the city. But underneath it all, he spread his hands, the gesture encompassing everything he couldn't put into words. You're still a criminal, I finished for him. Yes. No denial, no justification, just simple acknowledgement. The legitimate businesses thrive, but they're built on a foundation of other activities: gambling, protection, smuggling, selective enforcement of my will. I've minimized the violence, eliminated our involvement in prostitution and human trafficking, but I won't pretend my hands are clean. I thought of my father's letter, his claim to have been a moderating influence. Perhaps it was true. This version of Dante Russo seemed calculated, controlled, a far cry from the impulsive teenager who'd waged bloody war after his father's death. And the Vasilyev family? I asked. Where do they fit into this picture? Dante's expression darkened. Viktor Vasilyev controls the Port Authority through a network of corrupted officials. For years, we've maintained an uneasy truce. He allows my shipments through in exchange for a percentage and non-interference in his other operations. His daughter, Natalia, was to be the seal on a more permanent arrangement. An arranged marriage, I said, unable to keep the distaste from my voice. A business transaction, he corrected. Natalia understood the terms. She's her father's daughter in every sense, ambitious, calculating, willing to do whatever necessary to secure her family's position. Jealousy, unexpected and unwelcome, coiled in my stomach at the thought of this unknown woman who had nearly been Dante's fiancée. Do you care for her? The question seemed to surprise him. I respect her intelligence and ambition. In another life, we might have made an effective partnership. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. But there was never any question of feelings between us, Eleanor. In my world, marriage has little to do with love. Then what does it have to do with? I asked, genuinely curious. Power? Security? Continuation of bloodlines? His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. All the medieval concerns of feudal lords, dressed in modern clothing. I looked out at the peaceful garden, trying to reconcile this frank discussion of criminal empires and arranged marriages with the man sitting across from me, the man who had kissed me with such restrained passion, who had offered me an escape from his world even as everything in his posture suggested he wanted me to stay. And now? I asked, returning my gaze to him. What happens now that the Vasiliev alliance has collapsed? Dante's expression became grim. War, most likely. If Victor was behind the attempt on my life, or even if he just believes I suspect him of it, he'll move to protect his interests. Territory will be contested. People will die. People like me? The question slipped out before I could consider its implications. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. No, never you. I would burn East Harbor to the ground before I let harm come to you, Eleanor. The fervor in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a thrill of something like power through my veins. This dangerous man, who controlled an empire built on violence and fear, looked at me as if I were something precious. Because of my father? I asked, needing to understand. Because you promised him you'd protect me? Dante's thumb traced slow circles on the inside of my wrist, his eyes never leaving mine. At first, yes. But now? He hesitated, seeming to search for words that eluded him. Now it's something else entirely. Before I could press him on what he meant, his phone vibrated on the table between us. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening instantly. We need to go, he said, rising from his chair. That was my security team. There's been an incident at the house. Fear clutched at my throat. What kind of incident? A warning. He held out his hand to me. I'll explain in the car. We're exposed here. The drive back to Dante's seaside mansion was tense, the Porsche eating up the coastal road at speeds that should have terrified me. Dante drove with machine-like precision, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone to his ear as he barked orders to whoever was on the other end. I caught fragments. Full lockdown. Sweep the perimeter. Move them to the safe house. Each phrase ratcheting up my anxiety until I felt I might shatter from the tension. When he finally ended the call, I turned to him. Tell me what's happening. Someone left a package at the front gate, he said, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of rage. A box containing Marco's severed fingers and a note. Bile rose in my throat. Oh, God. What did the note say? Dante's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The daughter pays for the father's debts. It was addressed to you, Eleanor. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My father's debts? What could that possibly mean? Vincent Gray had been many things. A teacher, a money launderer for the mob, but all evidence suggested he'd been loyal to Dante until the end. I don't understand, I whispered. My father served you faithfully. You said so yourself. He did. Dante's jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. Which means either someone believes otherwise, or they're using your connection to him as a pretext to get to me. We rounded a curve, and Dante's beachfront property came into view. Even from a distance, I could see the increased security, armed men patrolling the perimeter, vehicles blocking the main gate. What now? I asked as we approached. Now I keep you safe while I find whoever sent that message and make them regret the day they were born." The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. This was the Dante Russo that East Harbor feared, the ruthless enforcer beneath the businessman's polished exterior. He pulled the car into a side entrance I hadn't noticed before, a narrow drive that led to a concealed garage separate from the main house. Inside, Mrs. Vega waited, her normally calm demeanor replaced by grim efficiency. "Everything is prepared," she told Dante as we exited the car. "The helicopter will be ready in 20 minutes. My heart skipped. Helicopter? Dante's hand settled on the small of my back, guiding me toward an elevator hidden in the garage wall. "You're going to my property in the mountains. It's more secure, more isolated. Elena will accompany you." "And you?" I asked, already knowing the answer from the hard set of his features. "I'm staying to deal with this." The elevator doors opened, and he ushered me inside, following with Mrs. Vega. "I can't protect you properly if I'm looking over my shoulder, wondering where the next attack will come from." Panic flared in my chest. "You're sending me away? After everything you just told me about wanting me to stay?" The elevator ascended rapidly, depositing us in what appeared to be a secure room filled with monitors showing different parts of the property. 2 men in tactical gear stood at attention, nodding respectfully to Dante before exiting through a heavy metal door. "I'm sending you somewhere safe while I eliminate the threat," Dante corrected, his tone gentler now that we were alone except for Mrs. Vega, who busied herself at a computer terminal. "It's temporary, Eleanor. A few days, a week at most. And if something happens to you while I'm gone?" The possibility opened a void inside me that I wasn't prepared to examine too closely. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at my concern. "I've survived worse than Viktor Vasiliev's tantrums. I'll find you when it's done." Mrs. Vega approached, holding a small duffel bag. "I've packed essentials for Miss Gray. The helicopter will land on the north pad in 12 minutes. Dante nodded. "Thank you, Elena. Give us a moment." With a knowing look between us, Mrs. Vega retreated to the far side of the room, providing an illusion of privacy. Dante took my hands in his thumbs brushing over my knuckles in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "I need you to trust me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Everything I'm doing is to protect you." "I know," I admitted. And I did know somehow, despite the madness of the past week. Despite all the reasons I should run far and fast from this man, and the danger that surrounded him. "But I'm afraid for you." A smile touched his lips, transforming his face. "Are you worried about me, Eleanor Gray?" "Someone has to be," I countered. "You're about to start a mob war, not start." His expression sobered. "Finish, decisively and permanently." He released one of my hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that he pressed into my palm. "Take this. Keep it with you at all times." I looked down to find a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "What is this?" "It belonged to my mother." His fingers closed mine around it. "Inside is a tracking device. If you're in danger, if you need me for any reason, press the clasp 3 times quickly. I'll come for you, no matter where you are." The gift stunned me, not just the value of it, but the meaning behind it. Dante Russo, who ruled his empire with calculated control, was giving me direct access to him, a way to summon him at will. "Dante, I can't. Please." The words seemed to cost him something, this man unaccustomed to asking, rather than commanding. "Wear it for me." How could I refuse? I nodded, and he took the locket from my hand, moving behind me to fasten it around my neck. His fingers brushed against my skin, sending electricity racing down my spine. When he turned me to face him again, his expression had changed, something fierce and possessive darkening his features. Without warning, he pulled me against him, one hand tangling in my hair as his mouth found mine. Unlike our first kiss, there was nothing restrained about this one. Dante kissed me as if memorizing me, as if I might disappear if he didn't hold on tight enough. His lips moved against mine with a hunger that ignited something primal within me. I responded with equal fervor, my hands gripping the front of his shirt as if it were an anchor in a storm. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "Come back to me," I whispered, surprising myself with the rawness in my voice. His eyes, dark and intense, locked on mine. Always. The helicopter ride was a blur of anxiety and conflicting emotions. Mrs. Vega, Elena, as she insisted I call her now, sat beside me in the sleek black aircraft, her weathered hand occasionally patting mine when the turbulence grew rough. Below us, East Harbor receded, its sprawling streets and glittering harbor giving way to dense forest and rugged mountains. The property, when we arrived, was nothing like I had imagined. No mansion perched on a mountainside, but rather a collection of modern cabins, nestled among towering pines, nearly invisible from the air. The helicopter landed in a small clearing, and Elena led me to the largest structure, a glass and cedar building that seemed to grow organically from the forest floor. This was Mr. Russo's mother's retreat, she explained, as we entered a spacious living area dominated by a stone fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows. He rebuilt it after her death, but rarely comes here himself. Too many memories, I think. I moved to one of the windows, gazing out at the wilderness that surrounded us. We were miles from anywhere, from anyone. Safe, perhaps, but also isolated from whatever was happening back in East Harbor, from Dante. "Will you tell me about her?" I asked, turning back to Elena. Dante's mother? A sad smile crossed the older woman's face. Sophia was a force of nature, brilliant, beautiful, with a will of iron beneath her gentle exterior. She was never meant for the life she found herself in, but she adapted for love. Elena moved to start a fire in the massive hearth. When Antonio, Dante's father, was killed, something in her broke. She retreated here, leaving Dante to manage both the family business and his own grief. "That's why he had to grow up so quickly," I murmured, fingering the locket around my neck. Dante's mother's locket, now entrusted to me. "Yes." Elena straightened, dusting her hands on her skirt. "I did what I could for him, but a boy needs his mother." By the time Sophia realized what her absence had cost him, it was too late. The boy was gone, replaced by a man who had built walls around his heart that even she couldn't breach. I thought of Dante as I'd last seen him, fierce, protective, his eyes blazing with emotions he couldn't or wouldn't name. "Those walls are still there, yes." Elena's gaze was knowing, "but perhaps not for you." The days passed in a strange, suspended state. The cabin was comfortable, luxuriously appointed with everything we might need. Elena proved to be an excellent cook, preparing elaborate Italian meals that she claimed were Dante's childhood favorites. We took walks in the surrounding forest, careful never to stray too far from the property's perimeter, which was monitored by security systems and occasional patrols by Dante's men. Communication with the outside world was limited to a secure satellite phone that Elena used each evening to receive updates. She never shared the details with me, responding to my anxious questions with reassurances that Mr. Russo is handling the situation or everything is proceeding according to plan. On the 6th night, I sat on the deck outside my bedroom, wrapped in a blanket against the mountain chill. Stars blanketed the sky above, more than I'd ever seen in the light-polluted city. The locket felt warm against my skin, a constant reminder of the man who had turned my world upside down in the span of a week. Was he safe? Was he hurt? Was he killing people in the name of protecting me? The questions circled endlessly, keeping sleep at bay. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the deck, and I froze. The security perimeter should prevent anyone from approaching undetected. But still, my heart hammered against my ribs. I reached for the locket, ready to press the clasp 3 times as instructed. "Don't be afraid," a familiar voice called softly from the shadows. "It's me." Dante emerged from the tree line, a dark figure moving with predatory grace despite obvious exhaustion. He climbed the stairs to the deck, and the security lights illuminated him fully, revealing a cut above his eyebrow and bruising along his jaw. I was on my feet instantly, the blanket falling forgotten to the deck. "You're hurt." A tired smile curved his lips. "You should see the other guy." Before I could respond, he had crossed the distance between us and pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. I felt him inhale deeply, as if my scent were oxygen after too long underwater. His body was solid and warm against mine, real and alive and here. Is it over? I asked, my voice muffled against his chest. His arms tightened around me. Yes, it's over. Later, sitting before the fire in the main cabin, Dante told me what had happened in East Harbor during my absence. Elena had tactfully retired to her own quarters, leaving us alone with a bottle of wine and the crackle of burning logs. Viktor Vasilyev was behind Marco's attempt at La Stella, Dante said, his voice flat as he recounted the events. But not in the way I initially thought. It wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a test. A test? I curled my legs beneath me on the couch, watching his profile in the firelight. The syringe contained a compound that would have incapacitated me, not killed me. I would have been taken somewhere, questioned. His jaw tightened. Victor wanted to know what your father told me before he died. A chill ran through me. Told you about what? Dante took a swallow of wine before answering. 5 years ago, your father discovered something while reviewing our shipping manifests. Discrepancies that suggested someone within my organization was working with the Vasilyevs to smuggle goods through our supply chain without my knowledge or approval. And my father reported this to you? He did. We identified the traitor, one of my cousins as it turned out. The man was dealt with, but not before he had given Victor access to certain sensitive information, bank accounts, safe house locations, names of politicians in my pocket. I struggled to reconcile this world of betrayal and violence with the quiet man who had raised me. So Victor thought my father knew something else? Something he might have told you before he died? Dante nodded, his expression grim. Your father kept meticulous records. Victor believed he had evidence of the Vasilyev family's involvement in human trafficking, specifically, young women brought in through the port and distributed to wealthy clients across the country. Horror washed through me. Did he? Have evidence, I mean? If he did, he never shared it with me. Dante set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. But Victor couldn't be certain of that. When your father fell ill, Victor had his apartment watched, hoping to recover any evidence before it reached me. After Vincent died, that surveillance extended to you. They thought my father might have left me information without my knowing it. The pieces began falling into place. The bugs in my apartment, Marco's infiltration at La Stella, the warning about my father's debts, the note with Marco's fingers. That was from Victor? Dante's expression darkened. Yes. A threat and a demand. He wanted whatever information your father might have left behind, and he was willing to use you to get it. But there's nothing, I protested. The only thing my father left me was the villa, and the letter explaining his connection to you. I know that now. Dante reached for my hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on my skin. But Victor was convinced otherwise. He believed your father had hidden evidence of his crimes somewhere only his daughter might find it. A thought occurred to me then, something so obvious I was amazed I hadn't considered it earlier. The journal, I said suddenly. In the wooden box at the villa. I never opened it. Dante went still. What journal? There was a leather journal with my letter. I was so overwhelmed by everything else, I didn't even think to look at it. Without another word, Dante rose and retrieved a satellite phone from his jacket pocket. He made a brief call, instructing someone to retrieve the box from my father's villa and bring it to the mountain retreat immediately. If your father did leave evidence, he said after ending the call, it changes everything. Viktor Vasilyev is currently contained. But with proof of human trafficking, I could destroy him completely, legally, through channels that would leave my own operations untouched. The casual way he discussed ruining a man's life, deservedly perhaps, if the trafficking allegations were true, reminded me of who and what Dante Russo really was. For days I had romanticized him, focusing on his protection, his intensity, the connection growing between us. But he remained a man who operated outside the law, who used violence as a tool, who spoke of containing rivals as if they were volatile chemicals rather than human beings. What does contained mean? I asked quietly. Dante's eyes met mine, unflinching. It means Viktor Vasilyev is being held in a secure location until I determine his fate. His daughter has fled the country. Their organization is in disarray, their assets frozen or seized. You didn't kill him. Not yet. His honesty was brutal, but somehow reassuring. He wouldn't lie to me, even when the truth was ugly. That depends on what we find in your father's journal, and on what you can live with, Eleanor. The last part caught me by surprise. What I can live with? What does that mean? Dante moved closer on the couch, his eyes never leaving mine. It means I find myself considering your conscience in my decisions. It means I want you in my life, not as someone to protect from a distance, but as someone beside me. It means I'm offering you a choice. My heart pounded against my ribs. What choice? Stay with me, he said simply. Be with me, knowing exactly who and what I am. Or take your inheritance, your father's villa, and build a life far away from East Harbor and the complications of my world. The journal arrived by courier the following morning. A leather-bound volume filled with my father's neat handwriting, detailing dates, locations, and names connected to the Vasiliev family's trafficking operation. With it was a USB drive containing photographs, financial records, and enough evidence to bring down not just Victor, but several high-ranking politicians and businessmen who had used his services. Dante made more calls, set more plans in motion. The evidence would go to specific federal agents my father had identified as uncorrupted. Viktor Vasiliev would face justice through legal channels, his empire dismantled systematically. Your father was more cunning than I gave him credit for, Dante said, as we stood on the cabin's deck, watching the courier's helicopter disappear into the distance. He built this case for years, waiting for the right moment. He was a history teacher, I said, a sad smile touching my lips. He always said the most effective revolutions are the ones that appear to come from within the system. Dante's arm slipped around my waist, pulling me against his side. And now I need your answer, Eleanor. Stay or go, with me or without me. I turned in his arms to face him, studying the face that had become so dear to me in such a short time. The sharp angles softened now by something that looked suspiciously like vulnerability. Dante Russo, feared Mafia boss, waiting for my decision as if his life depended on it. I should go, I said honestly. Any sane person would take the money and run as far from East Harbor as possible. His expression didn't change, but I felt the slight tensing of his body. And yet, I reached up to touch the locket around my neck, his mother's locket, his trust, his heart, and yet I find I can't imagine a life where I don't hear you say my name like it's something precious, where I don't feel your hands on my skin, where I don't get to discover all the parts of you that the world never sees. Hope dawned in his eyes, cautious but unmistakable. You'll stay? I'll stay, I confirmed, rising on tiptoes to brush my lips against his. Not because you need me, or because I need your protection, but because whatever this is between us, this impossible, unexpected thing, I want to see where it leads. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. I should warn you, he murmured against my lips. I'm possessive, demanding, and unaccustomed to compromise. I laughed softly. And I'm stubborn, independent, and no longer interested in being invisible. Good. His arms tightened around me, lifting me until my feet left the ground. Because I want everyone to see exactly who stands beside me. Eleanor Gray, the waitress who saved a monster and decided to keep him. Against all odds, against all reason, I had found my place, not in the quiet, careful life I had built, but in the arms of a dangerous man who looked at me as if I were his salvation. Whatever came next, whatever challenges we would face them together. Keep still, I had whispered to him that first night. A warning meant to save his life. Now, held safely in his embrace, with the mountains surrounding us and the future unfolding before us, I finally understood. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most unexpected happiness. The rain pelted against the windshield like tiny bullets, each drop magnified by the airport's floodlights. My fingers trembled against the steering wheel as I squinted through the downpour, searching for a face I'd never seen before. The wipers squeaked rhythmically, a metronomic reminder of how late I was running. Just look for a tall businessman with dark hair wearing a navy suit, my sister Ellie had said, her voice crackling through my phone speaker. He'll be standing at international arrivals with a black leather briefcase. You can't miss him. Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one sitting in her beat-up Honda outside JFK at midnight, doing yet another favor that Ellie would probably never return. But that was our relationship. I was always the responsible one, always picking up her slack. Tonight, it was picking up her boss's important client because she'd come down with something. I knew that something was probably a date with that bartender she'd been talking about for weeks. I rubbed my tired eyes, the exhaustion from my double shift at the diner still clinging to me like the smell of French fries on my uniform. I hadn't even had time to change. God. I hoped Ellie's fancy client wouldn't mind being picked up by someone in a ketchup-stained apron and jeans. The airport was strangely quiet for a Friday night. Through the glass doors of the terminal, I could see a few stragglers from recently arrived flights, their faces drawn with travel fatigue. I checked my phone again. 12:17 a.m. The flight from Milan had landed 20 minutes ago. He should be out any minute now. I turned up the heat in my car, trying to chase away the chill that had settled in my bones. Life hadn't exactly gone as planned for me. At 27, I was supposed to have finished my nursing degree, not dropped out to support my sister after our parents died. I wasn't supposed to be working 60-hour weeks at a greasy diner, coming home to an empty apartment with bills I could barely pay. But here I was, doing it all while Ellie pursued her dream job at that fancy consulting firm, rarely remembering to call except when she needed something. A figure emerged from the terminal, and my heart skipped. Tall, dark hair, navy suit. But as he turned, I saw he was much older, greeting a woman who rushed toward him with open arms. Not my pickup. Then I saw him. He stood just beyond the sliding glass doors, a striking silhouette against the bright lights of the terminal. Tall, yes. Dark hair, absolutely. Navy suit, impeccable. But Ellie had failed to mention how the suit would fit him like it had been poured onto his frame, or how his presence would command attention even in a crowded airport. He wasn't just looking around. He was surveying, calculating, his gaze sharp and assessing. Though he appeared to be alone, I noticed a broad-shouldered man hovering several feet behind him. Attention vigilantly sweeping the area, I swallowed hard and reached for my phone to text Ellie's template message. "Good evening, Mr. Milano. I'm Ellie's sister, here to drive you to your hotel." My thumb hovered over the send button, but something made me hesitate. There was an intensity about this man that made my skin prickle with, not quite fear, but awareness, like standing too close to an electrical fence. Before I could press send, he stepped into the rain, not bothering with an umbrella. The water darkened his hair, droplets sliding down his sharp jawline as he scanned the pickup area. His eyes, even from this distance, I could see they were piercing, swept over my car once, dismissed it, then came back with focused intention. My phone dinged with a message from Ellie. "Client's name is Adrian Milano. Be nice. This account is important." The man was walking directly toward my car now, the second man trailing behind him carrying what looked like a sleek briefcase. I quickly rolled down my window, forcing a professional smile. "Mr. Milano?" I called out. His stride didn't falter as he approached, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in my appearance. Without a word, he opened the back door and slid in, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and rainwater. The other man stored the briefcase in the trunk before taking position in a black SUV that had silently pulled up behind my car. "You're not Ellie," he said finally, his voice a low timbre with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. It wasn't a question, but an observation. "No, I'm her sister, Emma." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Ellie's sick tonight, so she asked me to pick you up instead. I hope that's all right." Something flashed across his face. Curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. He didn't respond immediately, instead pulling out a sleek black phone and typing something quickly. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable and thick with unspoken assessment. "The plaza, I assume?" I asked, trying to fill the void with professional courtesy. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, dark and unreadable. "Yes." Just one word, but it carried weight. Authority. A man used to commands being followed without question. I pulled away from the curb, acutely aware of his presence in my back seat. The black SUV followed closely behind as we merged into the late-night traffic. I noticed him scanning my car's interior, taking in the coffee-stained cup holders, the small crystal angel hanging from my rearview mirror, the worn upholstery. His gaze lingered on my hands gripping the steering wheel, on the small tattoo of a swallow on my wrist, a memory of freedom I'd once promised myself. "How long have you known I was coming, Emma?" His question cut through the silence, my name sounding foreign on his tongue. "Just a few hours," I answered honestly. "Ellie called me after her shift. She doesn't usually tell me about her work until she needs something." A hint of a smile touched his lips, there and gone in an instant. "Interesting." We hit a pothole, and I winced as my car groaned in protest. "Sorry about that. And about the car. Ellie usually arranges for a service, but there wasn't time. I prefer authentic experiences," he replied, his gaze fixed on the passing city lights. "Your sister has told me a lot about her life in New York. Though strangely, she's never mentioned having a sister." My hands tightened on the wheel. Typical Ellie, erasing me from her narrative. "We're not very close these days, and yet you're here, doing her bidding at midnight." His observation was casual, but penetrating. Rain continued to drum against the roof as we crossed into Manhattan, the skyline glittering through the downpour. I felt his eyes on me occasionally, studying me like I was a puzzle he found mildly interesting. "Tell me," he said after several minutes of silence. "What do you know about me, Emma?" The way he asked made me feel like my answer mattered more than it should. "Just that you're an important client of my sister's firm. From Milan. That's all Ellie told me." He made a sound that might have been a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Is that why you didn't check my identification? You picked up a stranger at an airport in the middle of the night based on a vague description and the word of a sister who doesn't even acknowledge your existence." My cheeks burned with embarrassment and something else, the first flicker of unease. I recognized you from Ellie's description." "Did you?" His voice dropped lower, a dangerous edge to it now. "Or did you just see what you expected to see?" I glanced in the rearview mirror again, meeting his gaze. There was something predatory in those dark eyes now, something that made my heart hammer against my ribs. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Emma," he said, leaning forward slightly, "that I am not Adrian Milano." The world seemed to tilt sideways. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I processed his words. Not Adrian Milano. Not Ellie's client. Then who? "Pull over," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. I signaled and guided my car to the curb, my mind racing through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. The black SUV pulled up directly beside us, blocking my driver's side door. Trapped. "I don't understand," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "If you're not Mr. Milano, then who are you? Why did you get in my car?" He studied me for a long moment, as though deciding something critical. "My name is Dominic Russo, and you, Emma, have made quite an interesting mistake tonight." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, as if I should recognize it, as if it should make me afraid, sent a chill down my spine. "I'm so sorry for the confusion," I stammered, professional facade crumbling. "I can take you back to the airport, or drop you anywhere you'd like." "That won't be necessary," he interrupted smoothly. "You see, I was expecting someone to pick me up, just not Ellie's sister." His lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Fate has an interesting sense of humor, doesn't it? The rain hammered harder against the windshield, creating a cocoon of white noise around us. Through the glass, I could see the silhouette of the man from the SUV standing in the downpour, watching, waiting. "I don't believe in fate," I said, surprising myself with my defiance. Dominic's smile widened, becoming genuine for the first time. "You will." My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. A text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "Adrian Milano checked into the plaza 30 minutes ago, took a cab from the airport." Before I could process this information, Dominic plucked the phone from my hand, read the message, and slipped it into his pocket. "It appears we have a problem, Emma," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Someone wants me to believe I've been forgotten at the airport, and now you've picked me up instead of the man you were sent to collect." He leaned forward, close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. "Tell me, do you think that's coincidence?" I shivered, not from cold, but from the implication in his words. "I don't know what you're talking about. I made a mistake, that's all. Perhaps." He sat back, regarding me with new interest. Or perhaps you're an excellent actress. Either way, you've altered both our evenings considerably. The rain began to ease, the torrent reducing to a gentle patter. Dominic glanced at his watch, an elegant timepiece that probably cost more than my yearly rent, and made a decision. Here's what's going to happen, Emma. You're going to drive us to my hotel. I'm going to make some calls. And until I determine exactly what game is being played tonight, you're going to stay where I can see you. That's kidnapping, I whispered, the first real tendrils of fear wrapping around my heart. No, he countered, his voice soft but laced with steel. That's protection. Because if someone arranged for you to pick me up by mistake, they did so for a reason, and until I know that reason, your safety is now my concern. I wanted to protest, to demand he return my phone and let me go. But as I met his gaze in the mirror again, I saw something beyond the dangerous exterior. A flicker of genuine concern that momentarily disarmed me. Drive, he said simply. And against all logic, against every instinct for self-preservation, I put the car in gear and pulled back into traffic, heading deeper into the city with a stranger who was definitely not my sister's client, and who seemed to think we were both now pawns in some dangerous game I didn't understand. As we drove in tense silence, one thought kept circling in my mind. How had a simple favor for my sister turned into what felt like the beginning of a nightmare? Or was it something else entirely? Because despite my fear, despite the alarm bells ringing in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that destiny had just dealt me a hand I wasn't prepared to play, but one that might change everything. Block 2. The hotel wasn't the plaza. Dominic directed me through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, guiding me away from the tourist-heavy areas toward the Upper East Side. We pulled up to a discreet building with an understated awning and a doorman who snapped to attention the moment our car approached. The black SUV remained our shadow, never more than a few car lengths behind us. The Garrick, Dominic said, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. More private than the plaza. Fewer cameras, fewer questions. My stomach tightened. The Garrick was notorious for its discretion, catering to celebrities and the ultra-wealthy who valued anonymity above all else. The kind of place where staff were paid handsomely to forget what they saw and heard. The doorman approached my side of the car, opening my door with practiced efficiency. The rain had stopped, but the night air remained heavy with moisture, clinging to my skin as I stepped out. I was painfully aware of how out of place I looked, still in my diner uniform, exhaustion etched into every line of my face. "Miss?" The doorman acknowledged with a slight nod. No judgment in his eyes. Clearly, Dominic Russo was the kind of guest for whom exceptions were made, questions unasked. Dominic emerged from the back seat, buttoning his suit jacket with a casual elegance that made the simple gesture look rehearsed. He placed a hand at the small of my back, the touch light, but unmistakably possessive. "My bags will be arriving shortly," he told the doorman, who nodded and signaled to a bellhop waiting in the shadows of the entrance. I wanted to run, to break away from his touch, to disappear into the labyrinth of the city where I'd spent my entire life. But the man from the SUV, who I now recognized as security or a bodyguard, had positioned himself strategically between me and the street, and there was something else keeping me rooted in place. Curiosity, mingled with a strange sense that leaving now would be more dangerous than staying. The lobby of the Garrick was a study in understated luxury. Dark wood, soft lighting, and staff who moved with the quiet efficiency of those accustomed to serving the powerful. Not a single head turned as Dominic guided me across the marble floor to a private elevator. His hand remained at my back, warm and firm, a constant reminder of his control over the situation, over me. "Why am I here?" I finally asked as the elevator doors closed, sealing us in together. His bodyguard had remained in the lobby, which both relieved and unsettled me. Dominic's dark eyes studied my face for a moment, before he answered, "Because I don't believe in coincidences, Emma. And neither should you." The elevator opened directly into a penthouse suite that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the glittering city skyline. Furniture that looked both antique and impossibly comfortable, and an atmosphere of cultivated tranquility that seemed at odds with the tension vibrating between us. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, removing his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. "This may take some time." I can't stay here, I protested, finding my voice at last. I have work tomorrow, an early shift. People will notice if I'm missing. A smile touched his lips. A small, dangerous thing, will they? Your sister, perhaps? The one who sends you on midnight errands but doesn't mention you to her colleagues? His words stung with their accuracy. Ellie wouldn't notice my absence until she needed something else. My manager at the diner would be annoyed, but not concerned enough to file a report. The truth was, my life had become so small, so focused on survival, that my disappearance might go unremarked for days. You don't know anything about me, I said, the words coming out weaker than I intended. I know enough. Dominic moved to a bar nestled in the corner of the vast living area and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. I know you're loyal, perhaps to a fault. I know you're struggling, financially, emotionally. I know you're alone. He returned, offering me one of the glasses. When I didn't take it, he placed it on the coffee table and sat in an armchair, watching me with those penetrating eyes. What I don't know, he continued, swirling his drink thoughtfully, is whether you're involved in this little charade or merely a convenient pawn. I told you I made a mistake. I was supposed to pick up Adrian Milano. Yes, Adrian Milano, he interrupted, his tone suddenly sharp. A man I've never met, from a company I've never heard of, supposedly arriving on the same flight as me, at the same time, matching roughly the same description. He took a sip of his drink. Tell me, Emma, do you believe that's possible? When he put it that way, it did sound suspicious. A cold feeling washed over me as I considered the implications. You think Ellie set this up? That's insane. Why would she? I don't know your sister, Dominic said, his voice softening slightly. But I do know that someone wanted to track my movements tonight. Someone knew I was arriving on that flight, knew what I looked like, and arranged for a car to be waiting. A car driven by someone who wouldn't recognize that I wasn't their intended pickup. The weight of his words settled over me like a shroud. Who are you? I asked, barely above a whisper. He regarded me for a long moment, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. I'm a businessman with interest in various industries. Some people find my success threatening. The way he said it told me there was much more to the story. The suite suddenly felt too small, the air too thick with unspoken dangers. Please, I said. I need my phone back. I need to call Ellie, to understand what's happening. No. His response was immediate, brooking no argument. If your sister is involved, warning her would be unwise. If she's not, calling her could put her in danger. My legs felt weak, and I finally sank onto the edge of the sofa, as far from him as possible. Danger from what? From who? That's what I intend to find out. He finished his drink and set the glass aside. In the meantime, you'll stay here, where I can ensure your safety. I'm not staying the night in a hotel room with a stranger, I said, summoning what little courage I had left. A ghost of a smile played across his lips. This suite has 3 bedrooms, Emma. Your virtue is safe from me. The smile vanished, replaced by a steely resolve. But you are not leaving my sight until I'm satisfied you're not involved in this situation. Before I could argue further, a discreet knock sounded at the door. Dominic moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between me and the entrance. He pressed a button on a panel near the door, and a small screen showed his bodyguard standing in the hallway. Dominic opened the door, and the man entered, carrying both the briefcase I'd seen earlier and a sleek laptop. They exchanged a few words in what sounded like Italian, too low and rapid for me to catch. The bodyguard's eyes flicked to me once, assessing, before returning to Dominic. He handed over the laptop and departed without another word. Dominic placed the computer on a desk near the windows and began typing. The city lights cast his profile in sharp relief, the strong jaw, the straight nose, the intensity of concentration. Despite everything, I couldn't help noticing how handsome he was, in a dangerous, untouchable way. You must be hungry, he said suddenly, without looking up from the screen. The mention of food made my stomach growl embarrassingly loud. I hadn't eaten since my lunch break at the diner, nearly 12 hours ago. I'll order something, he continued, reaching for a phone on the desk. Preferences? The casual domesticity of the question in the midst of this surreal situation nearly made me laugh. I'm not hungry, I lied. He glanced up, his eyes seeing through the deception effortlessly. Don't lie to me, Emma. It's pointless and unnecessary. Something in his tone made me bristle. Fine. A burger and fries and a chocolate milkshake. I'd chosen the most mundane, unfancy food I could think of, half expecting him to curl his lip in disdain. Instead, he simply nodded and made the call, ordering exactly what I'd requested, along with something in Italian for himself. While he was occupied with the call, I took the opportunity to look around, seeking exits, weapons, anything that might help me if this situation deteriorated. The suite had a terrace, but we were at least 20 floors up. The bathroom might have a window, but likely nothing large enough to climb through. I was well and truly trapped. Your paranoia is showing, Dominic commented after hanging up the phone. I'm not going to hurt you, Emma. You've essentially kidnapped me, I pointed out. I've protected you, he countered smoothly. There's a difference. Protected me from what? He closed the laptop and turned his full attention to me. That's the question, isn't it? Who would want to know my movements badly enough to arrange this elaborate scenario? And why use you to do it? The way he said you made it sound like I was someone special, someone chosen. It sent an unwelcome shiver down my spine. I told you, it was just a mix-up. Ellie asked me to pick up her client. I saw someone who matched the description. End of story. Is it? He moved closer, sitting on the coffee table directly in front of me, our knees almost touching. Tell me about your sister, Emma. What exactly does she do at this consulting firm? She's some kind of analyst, corporate stuff. I don't really know the details. The truth was, Ellie shared very little about her job with me, beyond complaints about her hours and occasional boasts about important clients. And how long has she worked there? About 2 years. I frowned, trying to remember exactly when Ellie had started at Morrison & Keyes. Maybe a little less. Morrison & Keyes, Dominic repeated, his expression unreadable. Interesting. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. Do you know them? I know of them. He stood abruptly, pacing toward the windows. They have a reputation for handling difficult situations for their clients, corporate espionage, competitive intelligence, information that isn't readily available through conventional channels. My mouth went dry. You're saying my sister works for some kind of corporate spy agency? That's ridiculous. Is it? How much do you really know about Ellie's life these days? His voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. People change, Emma. They adapt to new circumstances, new opportunities. Sometimes they become someone their family wouldn't recognize. And I wanted to defend Ellie, to insist she was still the same girl who had shared my bedroom growing up, who had cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. But the truth was, I barely knew my sister anymore. She had transformed herself after our parents' death, reinvented herself as someone sleek and ambitious, someone who looked at me with a mixture of pity and impatience, as though I were a reminder of a past she was desperate to escape. A knock at the door announced the arrival of our food. Dominic answered, tipping the waiter generously before wheeling the cart into the room himself. The smell of food, real, hearty food, made my resolve weaken further. Eat, he said, arranging the plates on the coffee table. You need your strength. I eyed the burger suspiciously. Are you going to drug me? A genuine laugh escaped him, transforming his face completely. For a moment he looked younger, almost carefree. If I wanted to drug you, Emma, I wouldn't waste a perfectly good burger to do it. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. I took a tentative bite of the burger, which was ridiculously good. Nothing like the frozen patties we served at the diner. The fries were crisp and salty, the milkshake thick and rich. I tried to eat slowly, with dignity, but hunger won out over pride. Dominic watched me eat with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, curiosity, perhaps, or amusement. He picked at his own meal, some kind of pasta dish that smelled divine, but his focus remained on me. Why did you really pick me up tonight? He asked suddenly. The truth, Emma. I swallowed a mouthful of milkshake. I told you. No. He cut me off. Not what you've been telling yourself, the truth. What made you really look at me, specifically, out of all the people exiting that terminal? The question caught me off guard. I set down the glass, thinking back to that moment at the airport. There had been something about him, hadn't there? Something that had drawn my attention even before I'd matched him to Ellie's description. I don't know, I admitted finally. You just stood out. Like you owned the place, like the rules that applied to everyone else didn't touch you. Satisfaction flickered in his eyes, as though I'd confirmed something he already suspected. Perception. It's a rare quality these days. Most people see only what's on the surface, what they're meant to see. And what am I supposed to be seeing now? I asked. He leaned forward, his eyes capturing mine. The truth beneath the convenient story your sister fed you. The reality that you've stepped into something much larger than a simple airport pickup. And the fact that, as of tonight, your life has changed irrevocably. A chill ran through me at his words. I don't want my life to change. I just want to go home. Home, he repeated, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. To your empty apartment? To your thankless job? To a sister who uses you when it's convenient? His voice softened. Is that really what you want, Emma? Or is it just what you've settled for? His words cut deeper than they should have, exposing nerves I thought I'd numbed long ago. Before I could respond, his phone rang. A sharp, insistent sound that broke the strange intimacy that had formed between us. He answered with a curt word in Italian, his expression hardening as he listened to whoever was on the other end. The conversation was brief, his responses monosyllabic. But by the time he hung up, a new tension had settled over him. We have a problem, he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. It seems your sister has disappeared. My heart stuttered. What do you mean disappeared? I mean, Dominic said, his eyes never leaving mine, that when my people went to speak with her, her apartment was empty. No signs of a struggle, but clear evidence of a hasty departure. Drawers left open, closet half emptied, almost as though she knew someone would be looking for her. I finished, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Dominic nodded, watching my reaction carefully. The question now is whether she was running from me or from someone else entirely. I stood up, my appetite gone. I need to find her. I need to make sure she's okay, and you will, he said, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. But not alone, because if I'm right about what's happening, whoever arranged for you to pick me up tonight will be looking for both of you now. He moved toward me, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle notes of his cologne mingled with the scent of rain that still clung to him. Like it or not, Emma, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Your fate is now tied to mine, and I protect what's mine, whether they want my protection or not. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me, should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I found myself rooted in place, caught in the gravity of his presence, a strange flutter of anticipation replacing the fear in my chest. In the span of a few hours, my carefully constructed world had shattered, revealing glimpses of something darker, more dangerous, and infinitely more alive than anything I'd experienced in years. Sleep eluded me that night, even in the luxurious guest bedroom Dominic had assigned me. The sheets were softer than any I'd ever felt, the mattress perfectly supportive, but my mind refused to quiet. I kept replaying the evening's events, searching for clues I might have missed, explanations that made sense of Ellie's disappearance. Dawn found me standing at the window, watching the city slowly awaken. New York looked different from 20 stories up, more orderly, less chaotic, less real. A soft knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. Emma, Dominic's voice, already alert despite the early hour. Are you awake? I opened the door to find him impeccably dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray. He looked refreshed, as though the night's events had barely touched him. I, on the other hand, was still in yesterday's uniform, my hair a tangled mess, dark circles undoubtedly shadowing my eyes. We need to move, he said, his gaze sweeping over me assessingly. I've arranged for some clothes for you. They're in the living room. Move where? I asked, voice still rough with exhaustion. Somewhere safer. His expression revealed nothing. We've been in one place too long. The living room had been transformed into a command center overnight. 3 men I hadn't seen before worked quietly at laptops, while Dominic's bodyguard from yesterday stood near the door. On the coffee table lay several shopping bags from high-end boutiques. "These should fit," Dominic said, gesturing to the bags. "The bathroom is yours for 30 minutes. It wasn't a request. I gathered the bags and retreated to the massive marble bathroom, where I found toiletries laid out with military precision. Everything a woman might need, from high-end shampoo to makeup. The shower helped clear my head, the hot water washing away some of the previous night's tension. I examined the clothes Dominic had provided. Designer jeans that fit perfectly, a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, Italian leather boots, even undergarments with tags still attached. How he'd guessed my sizes so accurately was a question I didn't want to contemplate. When I emerged, feeling more human, but increasingly unsettled by the evident resources at Dominic's disposal, he was ending a phone call. His eyes swept over me, lingering for a moment before he nodded with approval. "Better," he said simply. "We leave in 10 minutes. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening," I insisted, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "Where's my sister? Who are you really? And why am I still here?" The men at the laptops paused momentarily, then resumed their work with studied concentration. Dominic moved closer to me, lowering his voice. "Your sister appears to have connections to people who want information about my business dealings. Information worth killing for." His voice was matter of fact, as though discussing the weather. Whether she's working with them willingly or under coercion is unclear. "That's insane," I whispered, though a knot of dread was forming in my stomach. "Ellie wouldn't—" "People rarely show their true nature to those they love," Dominic interrupted gently. "As for who I am," he hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "I manage various enterprises across Europe and North America. Some legitimate, some less so. My arrival in New York was meant to be confidential." "You're a criminal," I said flatly. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "The line between criminal and businessman is often a matter of perspective, Emma." "And me?" I pressed. "Why am I still here? Why not just let me go?" "Because whoever arranged last night's mistake now knows you're with me instead of Adrian Milano." His eyes hardened. "They'll assume you've told me everything. About the setup, about their plans. They'll want to silence you, either to protect themselves or to hurt me." He stepped closer still, and I won't allow that. The protective intensity in his voice sent an involuntary shiver through me, not entirely from fear. "What about the police?" I suggested weakly. This time his smile was cold. "Police involvement would complicate matters for everyone, including your sister. My way is cleaner." Before I could argue further, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen, his expression darkening. "Time to go," he said, all business now. He turned to his men. "Finish here. Usual protocol." He guided me toward the door with a hand at the small of my back, that same possessive touch from yesterday. The bodyguard led us to a service elevator I hadn't known existed. "Where are we going?" I asked as we descended. "Somewhere my enemies won't look for us," Dominic replied cryptically. The garage beneath the hotel was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Instead of the black SUV from last night, a nondescript sedan waited, engine already running. Dominic opened the rear door for me, then slid in beside me. His bodyguard took the wheel. "Your sister has made 3 calls since disappearing," Dominic said as we merged into morning traffic. 2 to burner phones we can't trace. The 3rd to Morrison and Keys. "You're having her calls tracked?" I asked, horrified. "I have resources," he said simply. "The question is why she'd risk calling her employer if she's running from them." A sick feeling washed over me. Unless she's not running from them, unless she's running with them. Dominic's eyes met mine, approval in their depths. "Precisely." The city streamed past as we headed toward the Brooklyn Bridge. I watched the familiar landmarks recede, feeling as though I was being carried further from my real life with every passing block. "There's something you're not telling me," I said finally. "This isn't just about business information. No one goes to these lengths for corporate secrets." Dominic studied me for a long moment. "You're perceptive. It's refreshing." He seemed to weigh his next words carefully. "Your sister's firm has connections to a family that once had disagreements with mine. Old wounds." never properly healed. A family? You mean... The realization hit me suddenly. You're actually Mafia. Not just a criminal. Organized crime. I prefer organization, he corrected mildly. But yes, my family has controlled certain interests in Milan for generations. The Castellani family once challenged that control. We thought that matter resolved decades ago. And now? I prompted. Now it seems they're making a move in America, using Morrison and Keyes as a front for their operations. His jaw tightened. Using your sister to gather intelligence. I shook my head, disbelieving. Ellie's just an analyst. She accessed files on my businesses, my properties, my security protocols. He cut in, all within the last month. Either she knew exactly what she was doing, or someone was using her credentials. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Either my sister was knowingly working with criminals, or she was in danger. Neither possibility was comforting. We crossed the bridge into Brooklyn, the Manhattan skyline shrinking behind us. After several turns and what seemed like intentional detours, we pulled up to a restored brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street. We'll be safe here temporarily, Dominic said, helping me from the car. The property belongs to a shell corporation. It can't be traced to me. The interior of the brownstone was a startling contrast to the Garrick's opulence. Warm, homey, with comfortable furniture and family photographs. Actual family photographs, I realized with shock. A younger Dominic with an older man who shared his features. Dominic in his 20s, arm around a smiling woman, children I didn't recognize. Your family? I asked, studying a particular photo where Dominic looked carefree, younger in spirit than mere years. My parents. My sister. A shadow crossed his face. Before things changed. There was history there. Pain I couldn't access. Before I could ask more, his phone rang again. This time the call was brief but clearly significant. When he hung up, his expression was grim. They found your sister, he said. My heart leapt. Where? Is she okay? JFK, attempting to board a flight to Milan. His eyes never left mine, with a man identified as Franco Castellani. The name meant nothing to me, but the implication was clear. She's working with them. It appears so. His voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, Emma. Don't be, I said, surprising myself with the hardness in my voice. Ellie made her choice. I just need to understand why. Dominic nodded, watching me with new respect. We'll find out. My men are bringing them to a secure location for questioning. The casual way he mentioned what was clearly an abduction should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a strange calm descending. Perhaps it was shock, or perhaps something deeper, a recognition that the rules of my world had fundamentally changed. Will you hurt her? I asked, needing to know the boundaries of this new reality. That depends entirely on her, Dominic replied honestly. I don't harm women as a rule, but betrayal requires consequences. A shiver ran through me at his words. And me? What consequences do I face for my unwitting role in all this? He moved closer, his gaze intense. You're not responsible for your sister's choices, Emma, but you are now involved in a situation from which there's no simple exit. His hand lifted to brush a strand of hair from my face, the touch surprisingly gentle. Your life as you knew it is over. The question is, what you want your new life to be. The implication hung between us, heavy with possibilities both frightening and strangely exhilarating. In the space of 24 hours, I'd gone from an invisible woman leading a half-lived life to someone at the center of a dangerous game, seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in years. I want the truth, I said finally, from Ellie, from you, about everything. A small, approving smile touched his lips. Then that's what you'll have. He checked his watch. They'll be arriving within the hour. I suggest you prepare yourself. Family reunions can be emotional. As he moved away to make another call, I found myself watching him, the confident set of his shoulders, the fluid grace with which he moved, the aura of absolute control that surrounded him. I should have been planning my escape, should have been horrified by my complicity in whatever was about to happen. Instead, I felt more awake, more alive than I had in years. The dull gray of my existence had been replaced by vivid color, dangerous and intoxicating. And standing at the center of this transformation was Dominic Russo, a man who had claimed me as his to protect, his to keep. A man who, despite everything rational within me, I was beginning to trust. They brought Ellie in blindfolded, her wrists secured in front of her with plastic zip ties. The sight of my sister, disheveled, frightened, yet somehow still maintaining that air of superiority that had defined her since our parents' death, sent conflicting waves of relief and anger through me. The man who had been with her, Franco Castellani, I presumed, was taken to another part of the brownstone. I caught only a glimpse of him, tall, blonde, handsome in a polished way that seemed at odds with the circumstances. He walked with his head high, unafraid, his eyes scanning his surroundings with calculated interest. Dominic directed his men to bring Ellie to a study at the back of the house, a warm room lined with bookshelves, comfortable leather furniture, and a large desk that dominated one wall. It felt oddly intimate for what was essentially an interrogation. "Sit," Dominic commanded, his voice colder than I'd heard it before. One of his men removed Ellie's blindfold. She blinked rapidly, adjusting to the light, before her eyes landed on me. "Emma?" Confusion, then fear, then calculation flashed across her face in rapid succession. "What are you doing here? Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" The concern seemed genuine, but something in her tone rang false, as though she were performing concern rather than feeling it. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "No thanks to you." Dominic dismissed his men with a subtle gesture, leaving the three of us alone. He leaned against the desk, observing our reunion with clinical interest. "Emma," Ellie said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You need to get away from him. He's dangerous. These people are criminals. Stop," I interrupted, surprising both her and myself with my authority. "Just stop, Ellie. I know what you did." She flinched slightly before her expression hardened. "You don't know anything. I know you sent me to pick up a man who doesn't exist," I countered. "I know you've been accessing files on Dominic's businesses. I know you were trying to flee the country with Franco Castellani." Ellie's eyes darted to Dominic, who watched the exchange impassively. "He's manipulating you, Emma. That's what he does. He's a monster. His whole family are monsters." Dominic smiled faintly, seemingly amused by the accusation. The Castellani perspective is always entertaining, if somewhat lacking in self-awareness. "Castellani?" I repeated, looking between them. "Ellie, what is he talking about?" My sister fell silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Your sister hasn't been entirely forthcoming about her background," Dominic supplied, pushing himself away from the desk to circle behind Ellie's chair. "Morrison & Keyes isn't just a consulting firm. It's a front for Castellani operations in North America, and your sister isn't just an analyst. She's Franco Castellani's wife." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Wife? That's not... Ellie isn't married. 3 years this December," Dominic corrected gently. "A small ceremony in Milan. Very exclusive." I stared at my sister, this woman I thought I knew, searching for any sign of denial. There was none. "Why?" I whispered, the single word containing a universe of hurt. Ellie lifted her chin defiantly. "You wouldn't understand. After Mom and Dad died, I was drowning, working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat while you chased that nursing degree that was never going to happen." A bitter edge crept into her voice. "Then I met Franco at a corporate event. He saw something in me. Potential, a future beyond serving drinks and filing paperwork." "So you married into the Mafia?" I asked incredulously. "I married into power," she corrected sharply. "Into a family that actually gets things done, instead of just talking about rules and ethics while the world burns around them." I recognized the rhetoric. Echoes of arguments we'd had after our parents' accident, when the insurance company had used legal loopholes to deny their claim, when the justice system had failed to hold the drunk driver accountable. "And what was I in all this?" I asked, a hollow feeling spreading in my chest. "Just a convenient cover for your new life?" Something like regret flickered across her face. "You were safe, Emma. Uninvolved. I kept you separate from all this deliberately. Until last night," Dominic interjected, his voice dangerously soft, when you dangled her in front of me like bait. Ellie's gaze snapped to him, hatred burning in her eyes. That wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to pick up a business associate of the firm, a real person, just not the one we told her to look for. She wasn't supposed to find you, but she did, Dominic said, a strange note of satisfaction in his voice. Fate has a curious sense of humor, doesn't it? It wasn't fate, Ellie spat. It was a mistake, a stupid coincidence. Perhaps, he conceded, though his expression suggested he believed otherwise. But here we are. Your sister, now deeply involved in a conflict she knew nothing about. Your husband, currently explaining to my associates why he thought infiltrating my organizations was worth the inevitable consequences. He leaned down, his face close to hers. And you, about to tell me exactly what information you've gathered and who you've shared it with. Ellie's defiance crumbled slightly at the mention of her husband. If you hurt Franco, that depends entirely on his cooperation, Dominic cut in smoothly, and yours. I watched this exchange with a strange detachment, as though observing strangers. The sister I thought I knew had been living a double life for years, had married into a criminal family, had been lying to me with every interaction. The ground beneath my reality had shifted completely. I want to talk to my sister alone, I said suddenly. Both Dominic and Ellie looked at me with surprise. Please, I added, meeting Dominic's assessing gaze. 5 minutes. He studied me for a long moment before nodding once. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside. The warning in his tone was clear. He would be listening, and he would intervene if necessary. When the door closed behind him, Ellie sagged in her chair, the performance of strength evaporating. Emma, listen to me. Whatever he's told you... No, I interrupted, moving closer to her. You listen. Our parents are gone. You're the only family I have left, and you've been lying to me for years, living some secret life, married to a man I've never even heard of, while watching me struggle paycheck to paycheck. My voice broke slightly. Do you know how many nights I lay awake worrying about rent, about keeping our family home, about failing the promise I made to Mom and Dad to finish nursing school? Guilt flashed across her face. I sent you money. Crumbs, I corrected bitterly. Just enough to keep me dependent, but not enough to change anything. Meanwhile, you were what? Living in luxury? Playing Mafia princess? It wasn't like that, she protested. Franco's family, they have expectations, rules. I couldn't just save it, I cut her off. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Dominic everything he wants to know. Everything. Because right now, he's the only reason you and your husband aren't in the bottom of the East River. Ellie stared at me, shock evident on her face. You can't be serious. You're siding with him? After he kidnapped you? He protected me, I corrected, the realization solidifying as I spoke. Which is more than you ever did. He's a criminal, Emma. So is your husband, I shot back. At least Dominic has been honest with me. The irony of defending a man I'd met just 24 hours ago wasn't lost on me, yet something deep inside told me I could trust Dominic Russo. At least more than I could trust the sister who'd been deceiving me for years. What has he done to you? Ellie whispered, searching my face. This isn't you, Emma. Perhaps she was right. The Emma of 2 days ago would never have found herself in this situation, never would have aligned herself with someone like Dominic. But that Emma had been half alive, sleepwalking through existence. The woman standing before Ellie now felt awakened, her senses sharpened by danger and betrayal. You don't know me anymore, I said quietly. Maybe you never did. I moved toward the door, then paused with my hand on the knob. One last thing. The house. Our parents' house. Did you sell it? Confusion crossed her face. What? No, it's still in both our names. Why would I? Because you've lied about everything else, I said simply, then opened the door. Dominic stood just outside, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. He took in my expression with a single glance, then nodded slightly, as though I'd confirmed something he already suspected. She's all yours, I said, stepping aside to let him pass. As he moved back into the study, his shoulder brushed against mine, a brief contact that sent an unexpected current through me. He paused, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Join me," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Not a command this time, but an invitation. I hesitated only a moment before following him back into the room. Ellie watched this interaction with growing horror, her eyes darting between us as understanding dawned. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Emma, don't tell me you've fallen for him. After one day? Are you that desperate?" The accusation stung, but I kept my expression neutral as I took a seat in a leather armchair, deliberately positioning myself beside Dominic rather than my sister. "Now," Dominic said, his voice taking on that steel edge again. "Let's try this conversation once more, with complete honesty this time." He glanced at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded, giving my permission for whatever came next. In the space of a day, I had crossed a boundary I never imagined existed. I had aligned myself with a man who, by his own admission, operated outside the law, against my own sister. Yet as Ellie began to talk, reluctantly at first, then with increasing detail as she realized the futility of resistance, I felt no regret, only a strange sense of clarity, as though I were finally seeing the world as it truly was, without the filters of illusion I'd clung to for so long. And beside me sat Dominic Russo, a man of violence and power, watching me with something that looked remarkably like pride, and something deeper, more primal, that sent heat spiraling through my body despite the gravity of the situation. My world had shattered, but from the fragments, something new was taking shape. Something dangerous, exhilarating, and undeniably real. Night had fallen by the time Ellie finished her confession. What began as reluctant admissions evolved into a flood of information. Names, dates, operations, connections between Morrison and Keyes and Castellani enterprises across the globe. With each revelation, Dominic's expression grew more thoughtful, his questions more precise. Franco had been brought in midway through, his earlier bravado replaced by a grim resignation. Unlike my sister, he offered no resistance, answering Dominic's questions with a strange mix of professional courtesy and fatalism. There was a code at work here that I didn't understand, an underworld etiquette that both men seemed to navigate instinctively. As servants of that code, Dominic's men had come and gone, recording details, making calls, occasionally providing updates in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. Through it all, I remained silent, absorbing this new reality, watching my sister's double life unravel thread by thread. "Enough," Dominic finally said, checking his watch. "You've been forthcoming. That will be considered." The implication hung in the air, that their fate remained undecided, that their cooperation had bought them time, not freedom. Franco nodded once, accepting this uncertain future with dignified resignation. Ellie, however, turned to me with desperate eyes. "Emma, please," she whispered. "Don't let them—" "Take them to the safe house," Dominic instructed his men, cutting off my sister's plea. "Standard protocol, but comfortable accommodations. They're family, after all." Family. The word echoed strangely in my mind. Not my family, I realized, but someone's. These people, Dominic, Franco, even my sister now, operated within structures of loyalty and obligation I was only beginning to glimpse. After they were gone, a heavy silence descended on the brownstone. Most of Dominic's men had departed with the prisoners, leaving only 2 guards stationed discreetly outside. The house felt suddenly vast, empty except for Dominic and me. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and offered one to me. "You did well today." I accepted the drink, the crystal cool against my palm. Did I? I just watched my sister get taken away like a criminal. "She is a criminal," he said mildly. "As am I. As is her husband. The difference is in our codes, our loyalties." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "And our honesty." I took a sip, the whiskey burning pleasantly down my throat. "What happens now? To them? To me?" Dominic moved to stand by the window, looking out at the Brooklyn night. "Franco and Ellie will be guests of my family until certain arrangements are finalized. They won't be harmed unless they attempt something foolish." "Guests?" I repeated skeptically. "You mean prisoners?" He turned back to me, a faint smile playing at his lips. In my world, Emma, the line between guest and prisoner is often fluid. They betrayed a trust, violated certain understandings between our families. There are consequences for that, but not necessarily violent ones. I nodded, strangely relieved. Despite everything, Ellie was still my sister. And me? Am I a guest or a prisoner? Something shifted in his expression. A softening. A heat. You are something else entirely. He moved closer, setting his glass aside. You were never meant to be part of this game, yet you've played your hand with remarkable instinct. You've shown loyalty where it matters, courage when tested. His voice dropped lower, and something more, an affinity for this life that few outsiders possess. I should have been offended by the suggestion. Instead, I felt a thrill of recognition. The past 36 hours had been the most alive I'd felt in years, perhaps ever. The danger, the shifting loyalties, the raw authenticity of emotions stripped bare by crisis. They had awakened something in me I hadn't known existed. What are you offering me, Dominic? I asked, meeting his gaze directly. A choice, he replied simply. You can return to your life, your apartment, your diner job, your solitary existence. I'll ensure your safety, provide financial security. You'll want for nothing. He paused, his dark eyes holding mine. Or you can stay. With me. The implication was clear, the offer both terrifying and exhilarating. As what? Your prisoner? Your mistress? As mine, he said, the possessiveness in his voice sending a shiver through me. In whatever capacity feels right. I don't require definitions, Emma. Only loyalty, only truth. I set down my glass, needing clarity of thought. You barely know me. I know enough, he countered, echoing his words from our first night. I know you're stronger than circumstances have allowed you to show. I know you see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. I know you understand power, its uses, its responsibilities. He closed the distance between us, not touching me yet, but near enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. And I know that from the moment you saw me at that airport, something inside you recognized something inside me. The truth of his words resonated in my chest. There had been a recognition, hadn't there? A pulling together of two magnets, inevitable and elemental. This is insane, I whispered, more to myself than to him. People don't just fall into new lives like this. Don't they? His hand lifted to my face, fingers tracing the line of my jaw with exquisite gentleness. Sometimes, Emma, the life we're living is merely a placeholder until our real life finds us. His touch ignited something molten within me, a desire I'd never experienced with such intensity. I dated, had relationships that felt significant at the time, but nothing had prepared me for this visceral pull toward a man who represented everything I should fear. If I stay, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I need to know who I'm staying with. Not just your business, your position. You, the man. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Fair enough. He gestured toward a nearby sofa. Ask what you will. We sat facing each other, close but not touching, as Dominic Russo revealed himself to me. He spoke of his childhood in Milan, the son of a powerful family with centuries of history, of a father who ruled with calculated precision and unexpected compassion, of a mother who taught him that power without purpose was merely tyranny. He spoke of his sister Sophia, lost to cancer 5 years ago, whose death had transformed him from heir to patriarch overnight. Of responsibilities inherited and expanded, of a code he lived by that valued loyalty above all else. There are things I've done that you would find difficult to accept, he admitted, no apology in his voice. Necessary things, to protect what's mine. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. I don't need a sanitized version, I told him. Just an honest one. His smile was appreciative. Then honestly, I live in a world of shadow economies and power structures that exist parallel to the one most people inhabit. I enforce rules in spaces where law enforcement cannot or will not reach. I protect those under my care, punish those who threaten them, and maintain a balance that benefits all parties willing to respect certain boundaries. A benevolent dictator, I observed. He laughed, the sound warming something inside me, perhaps. Though I wouldn't claim benevolence as my primary motivation. What is then? Your primary motivation? His expression grew serious. Legacy. Continuity. Building something that outlasts the individual. The family business is merely a vehicle for that purpose. Family business. Such an innocuous phrase for what was clearly an empire built in shadows. And where would I fit in this legacy? I asked, the question emerging before I could reconsider it. Dominic's eyes darkened, his gaze suddenly intense. Wherever you choose. Beside me, if that's what you want. Partners, in all things. The offer took my breath away, not just for its boldness, but for the rawness behind it. This man, who commanded an underworld empire, was offering me a place at his side after knowing me for mere hours. It should have seemed absurd, even offensive. Instead, it felt like the first truly authentic opportunity I'd been offered in years. Why me? I had to ask. You could have anyone. Someone from your world, who understands the rules, the expectations. I've had those women, he said dismissively. They come with agendas, family alliances, political calculations. What I saw in you from the first moment was something rarer: authenticity. Strength without performance. Loyalty without expectation. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining, and something else. A spark that responds to mine. The heat of his touch traveled up my arm, settling low in my belly. And if that spark burns us both? His smile was both dangerous and tender. Then we burned together. The space between us seemed to compress, charged with possibility. His free hand rose to cup my face, thumb brushing across my lower lip in a gesture both possessive and questioning. I need time, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. It's too much to process in 2 days. Instead of disappointment, respect flashed in his eyes. Of course. I didn't build my empire on hasty decisions, Emma. I wouldn't expect you to reshape your life on one. He released me, creating space between us that felt both necessary and painful. Stay at my penthouse in the city. It's secure, private. Take a week, a month if you need it. Think about what you want, truly want, not what circumstances have conditioned you to accept. And then you decide. No pressure, no consequences either way. His expression grew serious. But understand this. If you choose to stay, it's not a temporary arrangement. Not for me. I don't share what's mine, and I don't relinquish it easily. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sparked something primal and responsive within me. A desire to be claimed, to belong, to matter so deeply to someone that they would reshape their world to include me. And Ellie? What happens to her and Franco? That depends partially on you, he said honestly. Family ties matter in my world. If you become part of mine, your sister gains certain protections by extension. It wasn't a bribe, I realized. Just a statement of fact. The reality of how his world operated. 3 days ago, I'd been a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, invisible to the world around me. Now I stood at a crossroads I'd never imagined possible, offered a life of luxury, power, and danger by a man who had awakened parts of me I hadn't known existed. 1 week, I agreed finally, to decide. Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident in his eyes. He rose, extending his hand to me. Then let's begin your education. See the world I'm offering before you choose whether to accept it. I placed my hand in his, the decision feeling momentous despite its temporary nature. As his fingers closed around mine with gentle strength, I knew with sudden clarity that I was already falling, not just for this man, but for the life he represented, a life of consequence, a life where I would never again be invisible. 1 week later, I gave Dominic my answer. I never returned to my apartment, never picked up another shift at the diner. Ellie and Franco eventually earned their way back into the complex hierarchy of families, operating now under Dominic's protection and supervision. And I became what destiny had intended from the moment I mistakenly picked up a Mafia boss at JFK Airport. Not a victim or a pawn, but a queen in a dangerous game I was born to play. Dominic's equal, his partner, his conscience sometimes, and always, irrevocably, his. The mistake that had seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of my life.